So picking a winner at the Grand National is a notoriously difficult thing to do. What sort of trends and characteristics are likely to produce a winner? And based upon what we're looking at in the field this year, what is likely to be a good selection? It's a very, very hard thing to do. However, fortunately, AI is going to solve that problem for us. What I've done in this video is I've gone through, asked it the very basic question at the start of the video, and then gradually expanded the question and the tools that I'm using to get AI to predict for us who's going to win the Grand National. So not that long ago, I did a video about using AI in betting and trading. And the sort of conclusion we came up with when we looked at it and we tested it on a number of things was that it wasn't particularly great at doing that. And that is because it was based around a large language model. It didn't have access to much more beyond that. And as a consequence, it would often get the statistics wrong. It would hallucinate and do all sorts of weird things. And therefore, it was a bit sketchy as to its usefulness in terms of what we wanted to be able to do with it. However, things have moved on quite significantly since then, and we're in the situation now where these models are now beginning to evolve and get bigger and better and smarter, and they can actually go onto the internet and read statistics, gather data. But you can also ask it deeper questions where it will actually go off and do something, and then it will reason with itself to come with an output that is much more sensible. And therefore, you can actually structure a question to allow it to do these things in much more depth and come up with pretty reasonable answers now. They're really great research tools. It's moved on dramatically since I did my first video. And while I was messing around looking for ideas as to things that I could do with it, I thought, why don't I ask it who is going to win the Grand National? So I'm going to be using ChatGPT for this, simply because it's the most commonly known service out there. There are loads of others and I have access to others as well, but let's keep things simple here. And in fact, we're going to start with a simple question, which is who is going to win the Grand National? Now, the interesting thing is if you ask ChatGPT this in its standard mode, it will basically go onto the internet, look for tips, and we all know how bad tipsters are, and then it will echo that back to you in effect. So it's not really doing anything particularly clever on this particular occasion. It's just going out, finding out what people are talking about, and then echoing that back to you in a format in which you can easily understand. And you can ask it questions about that, but it doesn't really produce any useful information. So the next step up is to use deep research. And what deep research does is it goes into all of the available information that it can get its hands on, and it does a bit of reasoning. So you can ask it a question and it will go off and research that with a lot more depth. So we have switched on deep research here, and we've asked it more or less the same question, and you get a completely different set of results. It actually goes in to each of these individual selections and summarizes and looks at each of the individual characteristics to give you a hint and more depth as to horses that are more likely to win. I mean, it actually does a reasonably good job, and it summarizes it pretty well, and it's talking about key characteristics and why it thinks that they've got a decent chance. But the interesting thing is, what you're looking at here really is it's still looking at external sources and compiling that and echoing it back to you, but with a bit more depth and a bit more logic behind it and a bit more reasoning. So it's a pretty decent summary, but part of the problem that we've got here is we're asking it a similar question. We're being very, very vanilla in terms of what we're asking it, and it's coming up with some good stuff, but I'm not sure that this is good enough. And in fact, what we need to do is go a little bit deeper, ask it more probing questions to come up with things that are more likely to allow us to pick a winner. So the problem we've had so far is we've just been saying the same question, but in a different way. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Whereas what we should really be asking it if we want it to do something intelligent is we need to say to it, have a look at all of the winners that have occurred in the past and see if there's some commonality or some trends within those winners. What are the sort of things that make a horse more likely to win the Grand National? So that is the question that we ask it next. So one of the features that I like about ChatGPT is the deep research mode. And it's really come on dramatically in the last year, because last year it would sort of replicate what it knew already, but now it can actually go off and find information and analyze it itself and see whether that fits with whatever you're doing and so on. And the great thing is you can actually watch it thinking through the activity. So you can see here, I'm thinking through factors such as horse age, weight, official rating, running style, and then it searches for stuff, and then it gathers some information. It says, I'm wondering if Coral's data distillation from the last 20 shows any promise. So you can actually see its internal dialogue and how it's evaluating stuff and where it decides to go next, which I think is actually pretty neat. This is how you would have an internal dialogue. So you can see it's looking at the Jockey Club information and various other sites as well. And look, I'm digging through Grand National trends. Winners typically are elderly debutantes, horses younger than 8 often stumble, while 8 to 11-year-olds often offer the best prospects. And, you know, I'm mapping out the trend. It's really interesting to see all the extent that it goes to and looking. And even here, you see it says the Jockey Club site may be tricky to work with due to its format. So I find it always fascinating to have a look at this and how it's researching it and how it's understanding it. So you can actually see that it's reading stuff, analysing it, seeing if that fits the data and so on. This is a huge leap forward from where we were just under a year ago. At the time of recording this video, we don't have all of the final declarations, but I did ask ChatGPT to go off and find the expected runners within the market, and then I got it to export it to a CSV file, which I've now copied into another question. And this question is basically, using the research you've done, can you create a table using the names of these horses and, you know, see if they fit the criteria? So we'll see what it comes up with. So the first thing it's done is it's asked me to confirm what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say to it, all of the above for the 2025 Grand National. And we'll see what it does. Yep, so it's confirmed that it understands what I want, and it's going to look at all the trends we've identified, and it's going to go off and do that research for us. So it's now gone through and applied all of the things that it learnt, and I've said to it, go and create a table sorted by official rating with all of those things, and just put a tick next to each of those boxes on the stuff that you discovered. So you can see these are the trends that it's looking at, and we can see here how it's rating each of these horses. And I've sorted it by official rating simply because, you know, that seems the easiest thing to do. You could sort it by anything. Now, one of the flaws that I'll point out here is that we don't know the weightings of each of these. We're putting a tick next to it because it's helped in the past, but we're not saying how much it contributes to the win. So that's a flaw in this analysis, and that's not a flaw with ChatGPT. I haven't told it to do that, but that's really how you would look at this sort of analysis. But we can go down here and you can see a few horses that have got ticks against all of them. And you can see quite a few horses that don't have ticks against all of them. So yeah, when we look at that, Chantry House, Vanilla, Monbeg Genius, and did I see Brave Man's Game? Yeah, Brave Man's Game's got one negative against it, which is recent form. But you can see it summarised that for us as well. So it's given us a few here that it thinks have some potential. But like I said, we're not weighting this. We're not saying that one factor is more important than another. So this is slightly flawed, but it gives you a bit of a clue. But it also helps you sort of strike out horses that are going to be much less likely to win as well. And that's an important part of this particular process. Picking a horse that doesn't really have a chance based upon this criteria, like Phil Dore, for example, probably is a good move. So yeah, it's done a pretty good job here, and it's allowed us to present all of that information in a format that's easy to understand. So what I've been able to do with this process is ask the right question into the right area of ChatGPT, and that's able to come up with a short list of horses that are more likely to win the Grand National. Is it going to predict the winner? Who knows? And there's always an element of luck in the Grand National, but it does get us that step closer. Is it perfect? No, it isn't. But again, what it's been able to do is sift through all that information, give us a short list of things that we're looking for, and then you can use that to place your bet. Or you could actually use it to definitely not bet on things that you feel have absolutely no chance based upon the criteria that is come up with. Now, one of the flaws with the approach that we've used here is it's not weighting each of those characteristics. So each one of those characteristics will have more or less influence over the potential winner of the Grand National. And that's one thing that you definitely should do. And I can give you a good reason why you should do that. We've used historical data to look at the Grand National winners, but the fact is, over the recent years, we have fewer runners at the Grand National and we have smaller fences thanks to rule changes around this famous race. So as a consequence, I would weight significantly a recent form on any particular selection that I use. So when I look at that shortlist and I look at the horses that could potentially win the Grand National, I would sort of tend to favour horses that are in form and have won recently, simply because the Grand National isn't the race that it used to be. It's much more like a normal steeplechase, although it still is very special, but necessarily that would bring that into play a little bit more than some of those other characteristics. But anyhow, I hope you use some of that information. I hope that it's been useful for you, and I hope that you find a winner at the Grand National.